Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. What's up, guys? So I posted a video yesterday talking about some of my do not draft running backs for the 2021 season, and it seemed like you guys really enjoyed that type of content. So I'm back again today to talk about some wide receivers that I will not be drafting in 2021 drafts. If you guys are enjoying the video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. That really helps the channel out a lot. And also make sure you guys let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I'll make sure to get back to you. But let's get into it. The first wide receiver that I'm going to be avoiding in drafts this year is going to be CeeDee Lamb, who's currently being selected at around pick number 37, which is the 14th wide receiver off the board. And I'm actually a guy who's really high on CeeDee Lamb. I think he's a great NFL player, and I think he has a very bright future and a very bright fantasy football outlook. And after the 2020 season, he was a guy that I thought was going to be a must target for me. I thought he was going to kind of fall in that wide receiver 20 to 24 range, and that was a spot where I'd feel very confident picking him. If he's going to be my wide receiver 2, I think he has a ton of upside at that slot. But now he's still a wide receiver 2, but he's a high-end wide receiver 2 at the 14th wide receiver off the board. And I just do not feel comfortable with him that high. He's currently being picked ahead of guys like Mike Evans and Julio Jones. These are players who have proven for years that they're top fantasy options. They have wide receiver 1 potential. And I'm not willing to just pass on those guys for CeeDee Lamb, who I think you have to do a decent amount of projecting to see him finish as a wide receiver 1 this year. CeeDee Lamb did play great in those games when Dak was healthy, those 5 games at the beginning of the year. But I think people are kind of counting on CeeDee Lamb to overtake Amari Cooper as the alpha in that offense, and I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Amari Cooper kind of has that spot locked in. I think CeeDee Lamb is definitely going to compete with him. You know, he's a great receiver, but I don't see him overtaking him. And right now, there's only one wide receiver being taken between the two. You have Amari Cooper being picked at wide receiver 12, and then you have CeeDee Lamb at wide receiver 14. So I just think there should be a little bit more of a gap between the two, and so that's why I'm going to be avoiding CeeDee Lamb this year. Next up, I have Odell Beckham, who is currently being drafted at around pick number 67. He is the 29th wide receiver off the board, and it's honestly pretty sad to kind of see Odell Beckham fall off in terms of fantasy. You know, I remember his early years with the Giants as a rookie and those first couple years. I mean, the man was just dominant. He was an alpha wide receiver, a top fantasy option, but you know, those days are long gone. He just does not fit well with this Browns offense. Under Kevin Stefanski, the Browns are a run-first team. They want to pound the ball with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and when they are passing the ball, they like to spread it around. They're not trying to hit one guy for 10, 12 targets a game, and they're just really not treating Odell Beckham like a true alpha receiver. With the Giants, Odell Beckham would be the man. He'd be getting the majority of the targets. He'd have a high target share, but he's really just not seeing that same volume with the Cleveland Browns. Odell played in 6 full games last season, and he scored 48% of his fantasy points in 1 game. So he's just not a guy that I want to rely upon to be a consistent guy in my lineup. I don't want him as my wide receiver 2, and I don't really think he's a high-end wide receiver 3. And I just think there are better options on the board. If you're selecting Odell Beckham, I think you're trying to cash in on a boom or bust guy. You think he's going to return to his old form and ball out. But here in this range with wide receivers, I would much rather take a safer guy like a Chase Claypool, who had a great rookie year, and I don't see why he's going to have a ton of regression this year, or a guy like Robbie Anderson, who you just know you can count on week in and week out to put up double-digit points in your lineup. And so that's why I'm not going to be targeting Odell Beckham this year. Now I'm going to talk about Michael Gallup, who is currently being picked around the 91 spot, the 41st wide receiver off the board. In 2019, it seems like Michael Gallup's stock was going to be on the rise. He had a great sophomore season, but then in the draft, the Cowboys went out and they picked CeeDee Lamb, who kind of replaced Michael Gallup as that wide receiver 2, which just really hurt Michael Gallup's fantasy outlook. You have CeeDee Lamb occupying the slot with the Cowboys, and then you have Cooper on the outside, who's that alpha in the offense. And I think it just leaves Michael Gallup as a weekly boom or bust player, which is not something you're going to want to be picking at this range. I think for Gallup to be fantasy relevant on a week-to-week basis, you would need an injury to Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb for him to kind of step up as that wide receiver 2. But I would much rather take a shot on a guy like Brandon Cooks, who I think is going to be a much more safe option. He's going to be the wide receiver 1 on the Texans. Even if it's not a good offense, I think he's a guy that I'd feel much more confident putting in my lineup as opposed to Michael Gallup, who I think you basically have to project an injury for him to be fantasy relevant. Next up, I have Marquise Brown, who's currently being selected at around pick number 98, the 45th wide receiver off the board. And I think at this point, we know who Marquise Brown is as a fantasy asset and an NFL receiver. He's proven the last 2 years he's not going to be able to operate as the true alpha receiver in that offense. And the Ravens went out and they drafted Rashad Bateman, which tells you everything you need to know about how they view Marquise Brown. I think they view him as a solid wide receiver 2, but I think they knew that Lamar Jackson was going to need some more help with weapons, and they went out and drafted Bateman, who I really think has a strong chance to be their number 1. And so I would much rather wait like 2 rounds and select Rashad Bateman, who has a much higher ceiling in my opinion, and likely a similar floor to Marquise Brown, than I would be to try to pull the trigger on Marquise Brown here at this draft spot. Alright, the last guy I'm going to talk about is MECOLE HARDMAN, who is currently being selected at around pick 114, the wide receiver 50. And in my opinion, this is one of the worst ADPs in all of fantasy football right now. Last year, in half-point PPR scoring, MECOLE HARDMAN scored in double digits 3 times in 16 games. So the man just has no consistency. He has an incredibly low floor, and he's currently being picked before guys like Marvin Jones, Rashad Bateman, and Cole Beasley. So this just really makes no sense to me. And I think this is where you can really see how important the end of drafts could be. Obviously, the beginning of your drafts, your round 1, 2, and 3 are going to be super important for establishing those cornerstones of your team. You need to hit on those guys. But when you get into the later rounds, making the smart picks late in drafts can really elevate your fantasy team. They give you great depth. It gives you the opportunity to draft guys that you can include in trades. And it's just really where you can kind of take advantage of the players who aren't as familiar with fantasy football and, don't do as much research as some of you guys. That's going to be it for my do not draft wide receivers. Thank you guys so much for listening. Once again, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and also make sure you like and subscribe. I'm going to be getting videos out every single day. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.